Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Please consider subscribing and check out our Patreon for more. Enjoy the video. In the grim, gray streets of New Cascade, life marched on with the precision of a metronome. Men strode purposefully to their assigned jobs, their drab jumpsuits a uniform of conformity. Women, clad in muted dresses, scurried to fulfill their domestic duties, heads bowed and eyes downcast. The city's towering skyscrapers, once symbols of progress and innovation, now stood as monoliths of oppression, casting long shadows over the populace. Amidst this bleak landscape, a lone figure walked with a determined gait. Nix, a young man with a lean build and sharp features, kept his gaze fixed ahead, his dark hair cropped short in the standard style mandated by the government. He navigated the crowded sidewalks, his thoughts consumed by the day's tasks at the factory where he worked as a technician. As Nix approached a nondescript building, he glanced furtively over his shoulder before ducking into a narrow alley. He rapped his knuckles against a rusted metal door in a peculiar pattern, 2 short, 3 long. After a moment's pause, the door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit stairwell. Nix descended the stairs, his footsteps echoing against the concrete walls. At the bottom, he entered a cavernous room buzzing with activity. Men and women, all dressed in an eclectic mix of attire, milled about, engaged in animated conversations. Some wore dresses and high heels, others sported suits and ties. It was a jarring sight in a world where gender roles were rigidly enforced. "Nix, you made it!" a voice called out. A figure emerged from the crowd, her fiery red hair cascading down her back. She wore a tailored suit, complete with a bow tie and polished Oxfords. "Scarlet," Nix greeted, a smile tugging at his lips. "I wouldn't miss it." Scarlet grinned, her eyes sparkling with mischief. She linked her arm with Nix's and led him deeper into the room. "We've got a big night planned. The resistance is growing stronger every day." Nix nodded, his heart swelling with a sense of purpose. He had stumbled upon the resistance by chance, drawn to their daring acts of defiance against the oppressive regime. In a world where gender roles were dictated from birth, the resistance used cross-dressing as a form of rebellion, challenging the very foundations of their society. As they walked, Nix's gaze roamed over the gathered individuals. There was Lux, the former professor who had been stripped of her position for daring to teach about the history of gender equality. She now wore a 3-piece suit, her graying hair slicked back. Beside her stood Zephyr, a burly factory worker who had traded in his jumpsuit for a flowing dress and delicate makeup. Scarlet led Nix to a makeshift stage at the far end of the room. A tall, slender figure stood at the center, clad in a shimmering gown, a wig of cascading curls framing their angular face. Nix recognized them as Orion, the leader of the resistance. Orion's voice rang out, commanding the attention of the room.
"My fellow rebels, tonight we strike a blow against the tyranny that seeks to control every aspect of our lives. Tonight we remind them that we are more than the roles they force upon us." Cheers erupted from the crowd, a cacophony of defiance. Nix found himself joining in, his voice mingling with the others. Orion continued, "We will take to the streets, a vibrant display of our true selves. Let them see that we will not be broken, that we will not conform to their narrow-minded ideals." Scarlet nudged Nix with a conspiratorial smile. "Ready to make a statement?" she asked. Nix hesitated for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. He had always been a conformist, never daring to step out of line. But something about the energy in the room, the shared sense of purpose, stirred a fire within him. "Let's do it," he said, a grin spreading across his face. Scarlet led him to a makeshift dressing area where an array of clothing in various styles and sizes hung from racks. She rummaged through the options, pulling out a flowing skirt and a delicate blouse. "Here, try these on," she said, pressing the garments into Nix's hands. Nix stepped behind a curtain, his hands trembling as he shed his drab jumpsuit. He slipped into the skirt, marveling at the way the fabric swished around his legs. The blouse fit snugly across his chest, the fabric soft against his skin.
He emerged from behind the curtain, feeling a mix of exhilaration and trepidation. Scarlet let out a low whistle.
Looking good, Nyx. You wear it well.
Nyx glanced at his reflection in a nearby mirror, hardly recognizing the person staring back at him. The skirt accentuated his lean figure, the blouse adding a touch of femininity to his sharp features. For the first time in his life, he felt a sense of freedom, a liberation from the suffocating expectations imposed upon him. Together, Nyx and Scarlet made their way back to the main room, where the other rebels were putting the finishing touches on their own transformations. Lux had donned a tailored waistcoat, a top hat perched jauntily on her head. Zephyr twirled in a shimmering gown, his muscular arms contrasting with the delicate fabric. Orion surveyed the room, his eyes alight with pride.
Tonight, we show them that we are not defined by the roles they assign us. We are individuals, each with our own unique identity. The rebels began to file out of the building, spilling onto the darkened streets. They walked with their heads held high, their vibrant attire a stark contrast to the monotonous gray of the city. Passers-by stopped and stared, some with expressions of shock, others with a glimmer of curiosity. As they marched through the streets, their numbers grew. Others, emboldened by their display of defiance, shed their own conformist clothing and joined the throng. Men in dresses and women in suits, they walked side by side, united in their rebellion. Nyx felt a rush of adrenaline coursing through his veins. With each step, he felt a growing sense of purpose, a determination to fight for a world where individuality was celebrated rather than suppressed. As the night wore on, the rebels made their way back to the safety of their underground haven. Laughter and chatter filled the air as they shared stories of their daring exploits. Nyx found himself in the center of it all, his transformation igniting a spark within him. Orion approached Nyx, placing a hand on his shoulder. You did well tonight, Nyx. You've taken your first steps toward true freedom. Nyx met Orion's gaze, a newfound determination burning in his eyes. I want to do more. I want to be a part of this fight. Orion smiled, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Welcome to the resistance, Nyx. Together we will change the world, one act of defiance at a time. As the night wound down and the rebels began to disperse, Nyx lingered, his mind racing with possibilities. He knew that the road ahead would be fraught with danger, that the oppressive regime would stop at nothing to maintain their hold on power. But as he looked around at the faces of his fellow rebels, at the fire in their eyes and the determination in their steps, he knew that he had found his true calling. He would fight alongside them, using his newfound identity as a weapon against the tyranny that sought to control them. In that moment, Nyx made a silent vow. He would become a symbol of freedom, a beacon of hope for all those who yearned to break free from the shackles of conformity. He would stand tall, proud, and defiant, and show the world that true strength lay in embracing one's true self. As the days turned into weeks, Nyx found himself drawn deeper into the world of the resistance. By day, he played the role of the dutiful technician, his jumpsuit a mask of conformity. But in the shadows of his small, sparse apartment, he began to explore a side of himself he had never dared to acknowledge. It started with a simple skirt smuggled from the Resistance's cache of clothing. Nyx stood before the mirror, his hands trembling as he stepped into the garment. The fabric was soft against his skin, the sensation both foreign and exhilarating. He smoothed the skirt over his hips, marveling at the way it accentuated his lean figure. With each passing day, Nyx grew bolder in his explorations. He experimented with makeup, his fingers clumsily applying mascara and lipstick. He watched tutorial videos on a contraband tablet, learning the art of contouring and highlighting. Slowly but surely, his reflection began to change, transforming into someone he barely recognized but felt an inexplicable connection to. Nyx lost himself in the process of transformation, relishing the moments of solitude where he could shed the expectations of the world outside. He twirled in front of the mirror,
the skirt flaring out around him, a smile playing on his glossy lips. In these stolen moments, he felt a sense of freedom, a liberation from the suffocating confines of his assigned identity. As his confidence grew, Nyx began to venture out into the world, his feminine attire hidden beneath the drab layers of his jumpsuit. He would slip into darkened alleys, shedding his outer layer to reveal the delicate blouse and flowing skirt beneath. With each step, he felt a rush of adrenaline, a thrill that came with the risk of discovery. Nyx's transformation did not go unnoticed by his fellow rebels. Scarlet, in particular, took note of the subtle changes in his demeanor, the newfound grace in his movements. She pulled him aside one evening, her eyes sparkling with understanding. "You're embracing your true self," she said, her voice laced with admiration. "It takes courage to do what you're doing." Nyx ducked his head, a blush creeping onto his cheeks.
I never knew it could feel this liberating,
he confessed. Scarlet squeezed his hand, a gesture of solidarity. "You're not alone, Nyx. We're all on this journey together." As the resistance grew in numbers, Nyx found himself at the center of a vibrant community of individuals who had shed the shackles of conformity. Men in dresses and women in suits, they moved through the city like a kaleidoscope of color, their very existence a defiance against the monochromatic world that sought to suppress them. Nyx's transformation became more elaborate with each passing day. He experimented with different styles, from flowing sundresses to form-fitting gowns. He learned to walk in heels, his steps growing more confident with each outing. Makeup became a form of artistic expression, his face a canvas upon which he painted his true identity. The resistance began to stage larger demonstrations, their numbers swelling as more and more individuals were drawn to their cause. They marched through the streets, a sea of vibrant colors and unapologetic self-expression. Nyx walked among them, his head held high, his skirt swishing with each step. As the movement grew, so too did the risks. The authorities, once content to turn a blind eye to the small pockets of rebellion, began to crack down on the resistance. Raids became more frequent, the consequences more severe. But Nyx and his fellow rebels refused to be cowed. They adapted their tactics, moving their gatherings to secret locations and communicating through encrypted channels. They became a ghost in the machine, a flicker of hope in a world that sought to extinguish their light. Nyx's transformation was not just physical, but emotional as well. With each passing day, he felt a growing sense of self-acceptance, a deep understanding of who he truly was. The pronouns that had once felt like a cage now felt like a liberation, a way to express his authentic self. In the midst of the chaos and the danger, Nyx found moments of pure joy. He danced with abandon at underground gatherings, his skirt twirling around him as he lost himself in the music. He shared laughter and tears with his fellow rebels, forging bonds that ran deeper than blood. And when the time came to take to the streets once more, Nyx stood tall and proud, a vision of beauty and defiance. He marched alongside Scarlet and Orion, their steps in perfect sync, their voices raised in a chorus of resistance. The world outside might have been a bleak and unforgiving place, but within the embrace of the resistance, Nyx had found a home, a place where he could be his true self, without fear or shame. As the sun began to set on another day of rebellion, Nyx looked out over the sea of faces, his heart swelling with a sense of purpose. They had come so far, had risked so much, but he knew that their fight was far from over. But in that moment, surrounded by the love and acceptance of his chosen family, Nyx felt a sense of peace wash over him. He knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, he would face them with his head held high and his true self on full display. For in a world that sought to erase their very existence, Nyx and his fellow rebels had found the courage to write their own stories, to create their own destinies. And in doing so, they had lit a spark that would ignite the hearts of a generation, a flame that would burn brightly in the face of oppression and light the way to a brighter future. As the resistance grew in strength and numbers, Their impact on the city of New Cascade became impossible to ignore. Nyx, now a prominent figure within the movement, worked tirelessly alongside Scarlet, Orion, and the other rebels to spread their message of freedom and self-expression. They staged elaborate demonstrations, their vibrant attire and unapologetic displays of gender nonconformity drawing the attention of the masses. Nyx, resplendent in flowing gowns and impeccable makeup, became a symbol of the resistance, a beacon of hope for those who had been forced to hide their true selves. Whispers began to spread through the city, tales of the rebels who dared to challenge the oppressive regime. In shadowy corners and secret gatherings, people spoke of Nyx and the others with a mix of awe and admiration. They marveled at the courage it took to stand up against the tyrannical government, to risk everything for the chance to live authentically. As the resistance's influence grew, they began to infiltrate the very institutions that had once oppressed them. Sympathizers within the government, drawn to the rebels' message of freedom, started to feed them information, exposing the cracks in the regime's facade. Nyx and Scarlet worked tirelessly to exploit these weaknesses, coordinating strikes against key government facilities and staging daring escapes for those who had been imprisoned for their defiance. They became ghosts in the system, their movements impossible to predict, their identities shrouded in mystery. The government, once a monolithic entity of control, began to crumble under the weight of the resistance's attacks. Officials turned on each other, paranoia and mistrust spreading like wildfire through the ranks. The cracks in the foundation of the regime grew wider with each passing day, the rebels' relentless efforts chipping away at the very core of the oppressive system. Amidst the chaos, Nyx and the other rebels continued to shine a light on the beauty and diversity of gender expression. They held clandestine fashion shows in abandoned warehouses, their runways a kaleidoscope of color and style. They organized underground art exhibitions, showcasing the work of those who had been forced to hide their talents. The people of New Cascade, once resigned to a life of conformity, began to awaken to the possibilities that lay before them. They watched in awe as the rebels defied the very laws of the land, their bravery and determination igniting a spark of hope in the hearts of the oppressed. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. The government, weakened by internal strife and the unrelenting pressure of the resistance, started to falter. Officials began to defect, joining the ranks of the rebels and adding their voices to the chorus of change. Nyx and Scarlet found themselves at the forefront of a revolution, their names whispered in reverence by those who had once been too afraid to speak out. They led the charge, their spirits unbreakable, their resolve unwavering. And then, on a day that would go down in history, the unthinkable happened. The government, its power eroded by the resistance's efforts, finally crumbled. The rebels stormed the halls of power, their vibrant attire a stark contrast to the drab uniforms of the oppressors. Nyx, Scarlet, and Orion stood at the head of the rebellion, their faces etched with a mix of triumph and disbelief. They had done the impossible, had overthrown a regime that had seemed invincible. In the days that followed, the city of New Cascade underwent a transformation that was nothing short of miraculous. The drab gray buildings were painted in a riot of colors, murals depicting scenes of gender diversity and self-expression adorning every wall. The streets, once a sea of conformity, became a tapestry of individuality. Men in dresses and women in suits walked hand in hand, their faces alight with joy and freedom. Gender-neutral clothing stores sprang up on every corner, their racks filled with an array of styles and sizes. Schools, once bastions of rigid gender roles, underwent a complete overhaul. Classrooms became spaces of exploration and self-discovery, where children were encouraged to express themselves freely, without fear of judgment or reprisal. Nyx, Scarlet, and Orion found themselves at the helm of a new government, one that celebrated diversity and individuality. They worked tirelessly to dismantle the oppressive laws and institutions that had once held the people of New Cascade in a vice grip of conformity. Under their leadership, the city blossomed into a haven of self-expression and acceptance. Festivals celebrating gender diversity became a regular occurrence, the streets alive with music, dance, and laughter. Art and fashion became tools of liberation, a way for people to express their true selves without fear. Nix, once a mere technician, found himself in a position of great influence. He used his platform to advocate for the rights of all individuals, regardless of their gender identity or expression. He spoke at rallies and conferences, his words a clarion call for change and understanding. Scarlet, ever the rebel, continued to push the boundaries of what was possible. She organized workshops and training sessions, teaching others the skills of resistance and self-expression. She became a mentor to a new generation of rebels, passing on the torch of defiance to those who would carry on the fight. Orion, the visionary leader, worked to build bridges between the once divided factions of the city. They sought to heal the wounds of the past, to create a society where everyone had a seat at the table, regardless of their gender or background. As the years passed, New Cascade became a model of what was possible when people were free to be their true selves. The city thrived, its streets alive with color and creativity. Visitors from far and wide came to marvel at the transformation, to witness firsthand the power of self-expression and acceptance. Nix, Scarlet, and Orion watched with pride as their once impossible dream became a reality. They knew that the road ahead would not be easy, that there would be challenges and setbacks along the way. But they also knew that they had lit a fire that could never be extinguished, a flame of hope and resilience that would burn brightly for generations to come. In quiet moments, Nix would reflect on the journey that had brought them to this point. He would think back to the early days of the resistance, to the fear and uncertainty that had once gripped his heart. He would remember the moments of doubt, the times when the fight had seemed impossible, but he would also remember the moments of joy, the laughter and camaraderie that had sustained them through the darkest of times. He would think of Scarlet's fierce determination, of Orion's unwavering vision, of the countless others who had risked everything to make this dream a reality. And in those moments, Nix would feel a sense of purpose wash over him, a deep understanding of the role he had played in this great unfolding. He knew that his journey was far from over, that there was still so much work to be done. As the sun rose over the city of New Cascade, painting the sky in a brilliant array of colors, Nix stepped out into the streets, ready to face another day. He walked with purpose, his steps sure and steady, a smile playing on his lips. For in this new world, a world of endless possibilities and boundless self-expression, Nix knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be. And he knew that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, he would face them with the love and support of his chosen family, the rebels who had fought so hard to make this dream a reality. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out Patreon for a lot more content and early access to YouTube videos.